Vast, uncharted spaces between star systems, the Nemesis was more than just a ship. It sent out an unexpected warning. It was normal for the Nemesis to scan near the outer bands of the Orion Nebula, but it picked up a strange signal. The frequency was different from what the species that are part of the Galaxy Council usually use. Because he was interested, Captain Miles changed the ship's direction to find the source. What they found was a planet that was marked on all government maps as uninhabited and uncharted. A ghost in the records of the galaxy. Landing and finding out. The planet was covered in thick fog and perpetual twilight, which were caused by the sun's weak light trying to get through two different atmospheres. Captain Miles chose to land carefully in an area that looked like it had been built on by people, which could mean that people were living there or, worse, were hiding. When Elara and her team got off the boat, they saw something that made even the most experienced of them feel cold. The creepy mists on the planet covered up a building that didn't look like it was made by humans. It was cold and metal, and had the air of a laboratory rather than a village. The place had secrets inside, and it looked like it had been abandoned. The dust on it made it look like it hadn't been used in months, but the power was still on, giving the tomb-like silence a hint of life. With the help of the dim clinical lighting, they went deeper and found a group of containment boxes. Most of them were empty, but one had a shocking sight inside. A human kid who was barely awake and whose pale skin was scarred from recent injuries. Captain Miles slowly made her way to the holding unit. She felt angry and sad at the same time. The boy inside looked up, afraid and happy at the same time. His eyes were big. He begged, "Please help me," but his voice was hoarse and weak. The boy's tale. Alara's nurse carefully took him out of the unit and quickly took care of his wounds while he told his story. He was given the name Seven by his kidnappers. It wasn't his real name. He talked about being taken from a frontier village and how his family had been killed in a raid. He said that the people who had taken them were attractions, who were part of the Galactic Council and were known for being very smart in science. Their tests were cruel and meant to see how far people would go for unknown but clearly bad reasons. The revelation. Captain Miles wrote down Seven's story and recorded every detail with a somber tone. The effects were very bad. Not only was there illegal behavior in space that was controlled by the Council, but a member species was also testing on humans, which is against many interstellar agreements. As they left the planet, Elara knew this was just the start. The building they had been in was now a silent tomb. The proof that was gathered had to be shown to the Galactic Council. It wasn't clear what role humanity played in this cosmic government, and this information could start a war that would spread to many worlds. Before that, though, they had to make it back without getting caught by Atraxian troops that would do anything to keep their secrets. When the Nemesis set sail for Earth, the weight of what they had found hit them all. Captain Miles could feel the cold days ahead. She knew that war might happen, but she was ready to fight a war for the sake of 7 people and any peace they could find. As the Nemesis quickly made its way back to Earth, the proof of the terrible things that happened on Atrak was encrypted and kept safe in its data vaults. During the transit, Captain Elara Miles worked on her report for the Galactic Human Alliance, which is in charge of governing humanity's interstellar regions. But the thought of Seven kept going through her mind. Seven had been through unimaginable horrors at the hands of an alien species that people had thought were their friends in the Council. The leak. Pieces of the damning proof got out to the human media before the Nemesis even arrived. The terrifying pictures of Seven's captivity and scars spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. The news sites, always hungry for a scandal, especially one involving the mysterious attractions, ran stories about Seven around the clock, making people angry and horrified. Human lands are in a mess. The public's response was very strong. Protests broke out in big towns on every planet where people live. The pictures of the weak, scarred boy next to the cold, clinical background of his jail hit a nerve deep inside people. As the crowds collected, they chanted and waved banners that demanded justice for Seven and punishment for the Atraxian liars. Unhappy protesters surrounded the Atraxian embassy on Mars and yelled at cops as they fought with each other. The embassy, a sleek building made of glass and steel that was now under attack, became a sign of bad behavior in Atraxia. The GHA's response. The leaders of the GHA called an emergency meeting to deal with the crisis because of the huge amount of pressure from the people. Captain Miles was asked to go ahead and tell everyone what she had found. The whole galaxy was watching her as she stood in front of the planetary representatives and told them about the horrible things that had been found on the secret planet. Her voice was steady but filled with cold anger. The group was split up. Some members wanted the attractions to be punished right away and kicked out of the Galactic Council. Others told them to be careful because they were afraid of what would happen if they were so rude to an important council member. A call to arms. The public's call for action got louder as the leaders talked. Veterans and people who are still in the military both said they were ready to fight the attractions. Already worried about the attraction military strength, the GHA's military advisors started making plans for what to do in case of a fight. Captain Miles's plea. In a powerful final speech, Captain Miles called on the audience to not only care about justice, but also do what they could to protect people. She said, "We are at a crossroads. The way we go today will determine what our place is in this world. Will we give in to those who hurt our kids, or will we stand up and say, no more?" The Galactic Council's lack of interest. At the end of the session, the GHA sent an official complaint to the Galactic Council, asking that the attraction's actions be looked into right away and that they be punished. But the council, which was mostly made up of attraction friends and bureaucratic red tape, said the accusations were false and meant to cause trouble. The fact that they were fired only made people more angry. Calls to leave the council and take direct action against the attractions grew stronger across all human lands. Captain Miles, who used to be just a military officer, became the face of a growing organization that wanted to get justice for the Seven and make sure that horrible things like this would never happen again. Everything was ready for a battle of galactic scale. The cries of humanity would not be stopped. The worlds would be able to hear them roar. The angry cry could be heard all the way to space, to Seven, for fairness, and to protect all living things from the power of the stars. After the Galactic Council was thrown out, the human regions were filled with people working toward the same goal. As the GHA dealt with the Atraxians' clear disregard for life and the law, calls for justice turned into calls for revenge. As diplomatic efforts failed and public anger grew, the GHA's military secret group, codenamed the Retaliators, was given permission to launch a series of targeted attacks against important attraction interests. Putting together the Retaliators. Captain Ilara Miles was picked to lead the Retaliators because she was good at fighting, knew a lot about strategy, and had a personal stake in the matter since she saved 7 people. The Retaliators were led by her and were made up of top soldiers, skilled hackers, and intelligence agents from all over human-occupied space. Everyone in the group wanted to get even with the attractions, which made them a strong enemy. The first attack. Their first target was an Atraxian transmission hub that was far away and on the edge of the Draco Nebula. This hub, which looked like a weather station, managed the moves of Atraxian troops inside the nebula. Breaking into the station was very dangerous. It was ringed by fields of asteroids and had a lot of weapons on it. The Retaliators got to the station by using cloaked ships to get through the dangerous asteroid belts. Quick work was needed to get rid of the guards, set off the bombs, and get out of there before anyone could send an emergency signal. The task went extremely well. As they moved away, the communication hub was destroyed by space junk, making it impossible for attractions to do business in the void and sending a clear message. People were fighting back. The attack in cyberspace. The Retaliators' cyber ops team, led by the amazing hacker Tali Corzin, started their own kind of war while the physical attacks were going on. Infiltrating the attraction data networks, Tali and her team stole information and put bugs that caused problems. One of their viruses, codenamed Erebus, messed up the attraction fleet command systems, which caused the fleet to move in the wrong direction and contact to get worse. Cyber operations gave the rescue team information about where other human prisoners were being held. The attackers changed their targets and started a string of daring rescues. They freed more than 30 people from an underground research center on the empty moon Xylon. Each rescue hurt the attraction's image of being invincible, which raised confidence across all human worlds and brought more people to the Retaliators' cause, which increased public support. As word of their successes spread, the Retaliators went from being seen as strange vigilantes to being praised as heroes. The media used to be critical, but now they saw them as brave freedom fighters fighting a cruel and unjust enemy. The GHA was able to grow the Retaliators' operations with the help of this wave of public support. Getting worse. Each successful action by the Retaliators made the attraction's retaliation worse. They stepped up their military patrols and shut down human areas. The attraction reactions, on the other hand, made the human colonies even more determined. They saw them as confirmation of their fears and a reason to keep fighting. As attacks and counterattacks got worse, the galaxy got closer and closer to a full-on war. Captain Miles, on the other hand, stayed focused. With each task, they got closer to her main goal, which was to reach the attraction core worlds. For the balance of power to really change, she knew they had to win decisively. No longer were the retaliators just protectors or killers. They were the worst people in the world, and their next target was the center of attractions operations. The study center on Python that held many more, like 7, in its dark embrace. The Revengers got ready for the riskiest plan they had ever come up with. It was more important than ever, but they were still determined. The universe waited and watched as Pythar's end got closer, marked by the roar of human determination and the cries of a child in pain. It was too late to stop the war that had already started. Captain Ilara Miles and her group of retaliators were getting ready for a big moment in their secret war against the attractions. Pythar was the target. It was a planet with strong defenses that was the hub of the attraction research network, and where horrible things happened to humans who were held prisoners. If they were successful, it would hurt the attraction war effort and pay back the people who hurt 7 and many others. Getting ready for the attack, the Nemesis was orbiting a moon that wasn't inhabited. This moon would be used as a staging area for the attack on Pythar. The crew worked very hard to put weapons, explosives, and hack modules on the attack ships. Everyone in the Retaliators team knew how important the task was. Not only did they want to get even, but they also fought for the future of all people. Captain Miles took a lot of time to inform her team. The plan was complicated and had to be carried out perfectly. They planned to get around Pythar's huge network of sensors and break through the planet's defenses by using modified stealth technology. Timing was very important, and even the smallest mistake could cause a catastrophic failure. Infiltration. The tension was evident as the Retaliators' fleet got closer to Pythar. Tala Corson took cloaking devices from attraction bases and changed them so that they worked quietly. This made the fleet invisible to radar and visual detection. They broke through the outer defense ring with shocking ease, which shows how smart Tali is and how sure the attractions were that their technology was the best. The Retaliators landed without being seen and got off the ship into Pythar, a dangerous world with dark skies and darker secrets. Sabotage. The team was split up into groups, and each group was given a specific job to complete. One group, led by Lieutenant Harrow, went after the energy cores that powered the shields and containment fields of the building. Another, working for Captain Voss, put explosives in places where the building was weak. Captain Miles and a small group of 7 people, who had become symbols of their cause, broke into the main lab building. Their goal was to free any human prisoners who were still there and get important information that could reveal more attraction plans. The runaway. As soon as the bombs went off and the last captives were set free, the Revengers started their dangerous flight. There were alarms going off, and Attraction security troops swarmed the building. As Miles' team fought their way back to their extraction spots, blasters lit up the hallways. The clouds above them seemed to be lit up by the first signs of dawn over Pythar. In reality, it was the Retaliator ship's glow that broke the cloak as they launched a full aerial attack to hide their teammates' escape on the ground. Python burns. Captain Miles gave the order when all the teams were found and the prisoners were safely in their care. The bombs went off in a series of bright flashes, and the shockwaves could be felt even as they went into orbit. The building that had been a horrible place for many people fell apart into pieces, a fitting end to a stronghold of evil. As they watched from the enemy, the blasts caused chemical instability that set off fires in the planet's atmosphere. What used to be a sign of fear and control was now on fire as a sign of anger and revenge. Pythar's burning clouds sent a message to the rest of the galaxy. Such horrible crimes would no longer be accepted by humanity. In the end, the loss of Pythar was a huge blow to the attractions, both physically and mentally. Their terrifying network had been taken apart, and they were no longer able to be stopped. When people heard that Pythar had fallen, they were filled with joy and new hope. Captain Miles felt sad when they won because he would never forget the horrible things they had seen and the lives they had lost or broken. But this victory was a big step towards stopping the threat from Attract and making sure that horrible things like this would never happen again. When the Retaliators went back to human space, It left a world in flames. It was a harsh act of revenge that had to be done so that peace could finally grow. The galaxy had been changed forever, and the war was far from over. But the message was clear. People were a force to be reckoned with, and the fires of revenge made them stronger. The burning remains of Pythar were a stark reminder of how determined people are. The terrible things that were done to human prisoners at the Attraction Research Facility had finally been punished. But Captain Elara Miles knew that destroying Python was just the start. People had to take things into their own hands because the Galactic Council didn't want to deal with the crimes committed by Atrakians. Now, this act of defiance would have effects all over the world. A lot of bad things happened after Pythar fell. The news shocked everyone in the Galactic Council. The attack made the Attractions feel ashamed and angry, so they ordered immediate military action against the human territories. They said the attack was an act of barbarism that had nothing to do with them, ignoring the fact that they had been doing brutal tests on themselves. But soon, word spread about the horrifying experiments that were done on Python. The leak included detailed logs and video proof that were smuggled out by the attackers. People in many worlds started to change their minds about the Attractions as word of these revelations spread. Pictures of people in pain and the heartbreaking stories of survivors like Seven made a picture that could not be ignored. The tribunal, the Galactic Council had to call a tribunal to look into the accusations against the Attractions because it was under a lot of pressure from different member species and rising discontent within its own ranks. Captain Miles was called again, this time to tell the galaxy about the terrible things she and her team had found. Elara showed the proof her team had gathered in a council room that was packed with people from hundreds of planets. She talked not only about the scars the prisoners had on their bodies, but also about the mental and emotional pain they had been through. Her evidence was very detailed and clinical, but she spoke with a lot of emotion, which made the systemic nature of the Attraction violations stand out. The defense falls apart. The Attractions had a hard time putting together a defense because the evidence was so well put together. Their arguments, which were full of rejections and evasions, fell apart when the evidence was put forward. When survivors like Seven took the stand and talked about what they saw and heard during the experiments, the room fell silent in shock. It was clear that what they said was very important. After days of discussion, the court found the Attractions guilty of breaking several parts of the Sentient Rights Charter. These included doing illegal experiments, torturing people, and causing trouble in the community. The decision was a turning point in the history of the Galactic Council. It showed that even the most powerful member species could not move without consequences. The Council told the Attractions they had to make amends with the survivors and put strict limits on their military and science work. The Attractions were also put on probation by the Council, which meant that they had a lot less freedom as members. The new role of humanity. Once the tribunal made its ruling, humans would play a bigger role in the affairs of the galaxy. Humans' place in the council got stronger as empathy and respect for them grew. People saw the GHA, and especially the Retaliators, not as bad guys, but as legitimate guardians of galaxy law and justice. Captain Miles used to be just a simple spaceship captain, but now he was a hero across the galaxy for being strong and fair. With her bravery and the spirit of her team, she not only got revenge on the Attractions' victims, but she also changed the galaxy's politics. Moving on, as the enemy came back to Earth, the celebrations were tempered by the understanding that those who had been saved from Pythar would have a long time to recover. On many human worlds, rehabilitation centers were set up to help people heal from the physical and mental injuries the Attractions caused. Captain Miles, who was being praised as a hero, quietly got ready for the problems that lay ahead. The whole galaxy was watching, and she and everyone else in the future had new duties to fulfill. Burning Pythar wasn't just a way to get back at him. It was also a statement that people would stand up for the rights of all living things against oppression. This meant that while the Galactic Council started to make changes, the fires of Pythar kept burning as a sign of hope and a warning. Even if it took a while, justice would always be done. Everything in the universe had changed, and people were at the center of this new beginning. After the Galactic Tribunal's important ruling, the once powerful Attraction Empire was cut off from the rest of the galaxy in a way that had never been seen before. Sanctions hit their economy and scientific community hard. The ruins of Pythar, which were still faintly lit by the embers of destruction, became a sign of revenge among humans and a new order based on justice and the rule of law all over the galaxy. Rebuilding and making peace. The attractions were punished and lost some of their power, so the Galactic Human Alliance led attempts to fix up worlds that had been damaged by war and neglect. Even though the GHA offered Captain Alara Miles many high-level jobs, she chose to stay in the field and manage the restoration of former Atraxian facilities into places of learning and peace. The biggest of these projects was done on Pythar. The planet went from being a sign of terror to a sign of peace. Where there had been labs where cruel experiments were done, there was now the Pythar Peace University, whose goal is to study how different species interact with each other and stop crimes. 7-7, the boy whose plight had caused the galactic upheaval, became the face of the new Pythar. He slowly got better from his injuries with the help of Captain Miles and a group of medical and mental health professionals. He then started helping other people who had survived Atraxian abuse. Because he was strong and could forgive even those who had hurt him, he was a great representative for the university's goals. Changes in space. The fall of Pythar had bigger effects on politics across the galaxy. The weak Atraxians, who were now looked down upon by the council they used to control, turned inward. Their government was shaking from internal fighting and power battles. But the GHA, which had won moral and military battles, took on a bigger role in the Galactic Council and pushed for changes that would stop another tyrannical government from coming to power. When trade routes that the Atraxians had been controlling were opened up, human lands did very well. Human diplomatic and cultural impact also spread. People used to think of humanity as a young, unimportant part of the galaxy. Now, they see us as an important part of the galactic society, someone who fights for rights and promotes unity. The legacy of the Retaliators. The Retaliators were once a secret operations team, but they were now publicly recognized by the GHA as a force that keeps the peace and steps in when necessary. Their job grew to include stopping horrible acts in battles involving things other than people. This turned their knowledge of war into a force for peace. While she was in charge of the Retaliators' change, Captain Miles also became a very important person in diplomatic circles. She used her position to change policy and make sure that the lessons of Pythar were not lost. Her autobiographies, which told of the dark days of her fight against the Atraxians and her road to redemption afterward, were required reading in all military and diplomatic academies in the galaxy. A peace that will last as time went on. The ashes of Pythar were always there to tell people what peace costs. The site of the old facility was kept as a memorial. Plaques with the names of all the people who were known to have died in the Atraxian trials were put on the burned-out ground. It was a sad reminder of the terrible things that had happened, and a promise from everyone in the galaxy that it would never happen again. Thousands of people came to the spot every year for the ceremonies to remember. Many of them had nothing to do with what happened on Pythar, but they came to pay their respects and promise to work for peace. During these rituals, survivors linked arms with Captain Miles and Seven, who often gave speeches about how important it is to stay alert, work together, and show compassion in the face of darkness. In the end, Python's ashes not only brought forth new structures, but also new ideas. The events that happened after Seven was saved changed the galaxy in a way that could not be undone. In the Galactic Council, humanity had gone from being a spectator to a guardian of the shaky peace that was now in place. Captain Miles was both sad and proud as he looked out over the crowds at a memorial service. He was sad for the people who had died, and for the harmless people whose lives would never be the same after the Atraxians' cruel actions, and he was proud of the peace that had been made from the anger of revenge. The galaxy would remember Python not only for the fire that started it, but also for the phoenix that rose from the ashes, starting a new age of fairness and cooperation between stars. Since Pythar's fall, years had passed, and the galaxy had settled into a new rhythm. The Galactic Human Alliance was very important in leading the interstellar society toward peace and cooperation. From the ashes of war came strong organizations and a renewed dedication to protecting the rights of living things. The Galactic Council changed. The Galactic Council, which used to be a group stuck in inaction because of corruption and waste, had major changes made to it. With more people having a say, new rules and ways to keep an eye on things were put in place to make sure that council choices were clear and fair. After having their power limited and their goals stifled, the Atraxians slowly fixed their reputation by working on galactic projects and following the council's strict new rules. Captain Alara Miles, who was now Admiral Miles, was less involved in day-to-day tasks, but was still a very important advisor to the GHA and the board. Her knowledge and sense of right and wrong helped us figure out how to deal with the galaxy's complicated politics. Seven's legacy. Seven was now a young man. As a boy, he had become a sign of hope and strength. His transformation from a victim of unspeakable horrors to a symbol of strength and forgiveness was praised all over the world. As a peace envoy, Seven went to different worlds to tell people about his life and how important it is to be kind and alert to keep the peace. His work, especially with young people who had been through war and abuse, was very important in healing the wounds that the attractions and other evil forces in the galaxy had caused. He turned his traumatic past into a force for change by starting support groups and rehab programs through his organization, the Seven Lights Initiative. The humanities opened up new worlds. When the attractions took down their walls, people were able to explore and live in new areas with greater success. People settled in new worlds and brought old ones back to life. Culture, science, and the economy of humans all did well thanks to trade and new ideas. The human organizations were at the forefront of galactic progress in medicine, engineering, and quantum computing, and the arts and sciences did very well. The fleet of humanity used to be a defense force, but now it was part of the Galactic Peace Corps that helped keep the peace and bring aid to difficult parts of the galaxy. The Retaliators, who were renamed the Peace Wardens, were very important to these efforts because they stood for justice and safety. Thoughts. Admiral Miles, who was on Earth in her office, looked out over the city with a thoughtful eye. From those dark days on the Nemesis, the world had changed a lot. She thought about the team that had been with her a lot. She also thought about the fires of Pythar and the people whose lives they had touched. From the ashes a galaxy reborn, her autobiography had moved and inspired a whole generation. At the same time, she knew that fear and confusion could easily break the peace. The things she and everyone who fought with her left behind showed how strong perseverance is and how long people will keep looking for justice. A celebration across the galaxy. The yearly Day of Remembrance was coming up. This was an event for the whole galaxy to remember the fall of Pythar and celebrate the peace that had been maintained. This year was different because it was the 25th anniversary. Leaders from all over the world got together to remember the past and make plans for the future. Seven was the main talk. From the platform, he could see a sea of different beings. He talked about both the past and the future. We get together not to talk about old hurts again, but to remember how strong it was to get better. Let our memories of the past give us the strength to be brave and hopeful in the future. Let's walk together as a galaxy, each of us unique but bound by our humanity. A united galaxy. When the ceremony was over, people from hundreds of worlds and different species who were united by a shared past looked up at the stars. The galaxy was very big and full of secrets, chances, problems, and hopes. It was because of the Retaliators, Seven, Admiral Miles, and everyone else who dared to stand up to darkness that the galaxy looked forward with hope, had learned from its mistakes, and had never been more united, no matter how big it was. The ashes of Pythar had stirred up a new age of peace, exploration, and shared wealth. It was called the New Horizons era.